All right, so this is the nesting season. So we have a sandhill crane here on a nest. And to begin, nesting season for us in the Northern Hemisphere begins in March and it'll typically run through June. The overall peak, though, is going to be hitting in April and May. So once we start getting closer into the spring, we'll see a lot more activity. But we do have winter nesting for resident populations. Like Kathy was saying, we've got those nesting spoonbills and herons and egrets at the Orlando wetlands. You can also see the herons building nests in Lake Apopka and all over the place now too. And residents rarely do nest during our equatorial migrations because you have that increased presence of predators that are coming through in the form of different raptors. And then you have increased competition with other birds that are moving through as well for food. So it just makes it a lot more stressful for those birds. So, why do we have the nesting season in the spring? Two main things cause it. It's the temperature and the rain, and that creates insects, lots of food for these growing birds. So, insects are packed with protein. These birds need to grow as quickly as possible. So, having this huge abundance of protein-rich food is fantastic for getting them on the move quickly. So how do we find a wild nest? The first thing is you have to know what species you're looking for, then spot some key behaviors of those different birds. Keep your ears open and listen. You can hear the nestlings begging, a couple other things we'll talk about in a minute. Inspect the trees for any kind of signs of nests. Look for pairs like these red-masked parakeets. It's always a good sign to see two birds together. And then finally, have your courtship and copulation. It's kind of the guaranteed sign that there's a nest somewhere close. So to begin with, we need to know what species we're looking for. So you have to take into account what kind of environment they prefer, the type of nests that they build, and then if their offspring are altricial or precocial. So like if you have these cliff swallows over here on the left, they're going to be in the eave of the barn. So if you're looking just underneath someone's house, it might be a little bit more difficult than a big barn like this where they can make a large colony. And then you have the sandhill crane nest in the center and the Arctic tern on the right. Both of those are ground nesting birds. So if you're looking for a nest in a tree, you're not going to be in the right area. And then depending on the two birds, the tern prefers to be in sandy beach. The crane prefers to be in a marsh so they can hear any predators sneaking up on them. So everything is very unique for the different species. So to start with an example, we're going to do the tree swallow. So they're secondary cavity nesters. They prefer an open, tall grassland environment. Their egg laying depends on the range where it's around April in their southern portion of their range. So in this kind of orange section here, this is their breeding zone. So in the southern areas, it's going to be closer into April and then June further up north in the Arctic. And so we can see we have a nest box here. And so this is an artificial cavity nest, but the birds are going to go into here, make a cup nest, and lay their eggs. We have the male here on the left and the female on the right. Males are just a little bit more colorful. And we have two fledglings here. And so the open grassland environment is because they are aerial predators for insects. So they need to have open space to chase down these bugs and catch them. So if they're in a tight environment in a woodland, they're going to have a lot harder time getting access to that food so that their offspring can grow quickly. Another example is going to be a monk parakeet. So these are an exotic species for us in Florida. They're native into South America, but they construct colonial stick nests. Often, it's going to be inside in a man-made structure. In nature, it would have been in large trees, but even in their native areas, they're in man-made structures too. So if you look for these big stick nests in towers and conduits, you can usually find them pretty quick. They prefer these really tall structures so they can see any predators, any kind of risk that could be coming to them. They're resident populations, so once they do become established somewhere, they're pretty well rooted in a zone. And then their egg laying is really dependent on how far south they are. So the further south it warms up faster, they're able to lay their eggs quicker. So as far as altricial and precocial goes, what that means is how the bird is born when it comes out of the egg, if it's able to pick up and run or if it's helpless. So a precocial bird like these common gallinals, pretty quickly after they hatch from the egg, they're able to move around, hunt for their own food. The parents here are teaching it what to eat right now, so they're going to be a lot more active. Think of like a horse or an antelope or a deer. They're able to get moving pretty quickly, compared to altricial, where like this house sparrows, they're or house finches, sorry, they're blind and helpless. So like a puppy or a human, they have to have their parent there to feed them, take care of them, protect them, all of that. So some of the key behaviors to look out for, we want to watch for any kind of nest material gathering, especially if you can watch them construct a nest, then you already know where the nest is. Seeing the bird fly off with food in its beak, like this American robin, it's got a ton of worms. That means it's probably going to go over to its nest and feed its young. Mobbing larger predatory birds, the kestrel mobbing a red-shouldered hawk there. It's a good sign that there's potentially a nest in the area. And then a quick quiet flight into a particular zone is another key feature that you should look for. Birds very rarely will sing near the nest because they don't want to attract attention of either another member of their own species that could try and raid the nest and steal it if it's a good spot, or a predator. So if it's singing in one area, it flies off to a different area and is completely quiet, you should go over there and see if there's a nest. So nest building, we have these osprey that are putting together a nest. The male will typically bring the material. The female will be the one that puts it all together. So if she likes whatever branches he brings, then she'll incorporate it. If not, she'll just throw it off the tree. We have a Carolina wren here with a spider. So spiders are a favorite for a lot of different birds because how relatively easy they are to catch and high protein. So again, during this season, you're going to have a lot of insect feeding for these young birds. And then mobbing, we have a common grackle going after a black-bellied whistling duck. So obviously the black-bellied whistling duck isn't going to do anything to the nest of the grackle, but because it's a large bird, the grackle sees it as a potential threat, and so it is going to chase it away and try and harass it. So next, listen. Hatchlings will be constantly begging for food. So the American robin down in the left, and then you have a downy woodpecker on the right. Uh, we were trying to figure out where this really repetitive sound was coming from, and then we looked and saw this woodpecker feeding its young. So it was very cool. There's actually some saliva between the two right there. Young birds will be practicing their song, especially at night. You can hear it a lot. You've got a they're practicing their repertoire, so they'll sound a little off, but that's usually an indicator that you have an active nest. And like I said before, parents don't sing near the nest, so keep that in mind. If you hear them sing in one area and you don't hear them sing in another area, that's a good sign that there's a nest over there. So these two are examples of begging young. We're able to cue me in on where the birds were. So we have a northern mockingbird on the right and red-bellied woodpecker on the, or sorry, mockingbird on the left, woodpecker on the right. But both of these fledglings were begging to the point where I could easily pick up on where they are, which it's a good indicator for the adult to know where they are to feed, but it also means that a potential predator could also find these birds. So something to keep in mind when you're looking for nests. So when you're inspecting trees, scan branches for cup nests. You can also look in the crooks of branches for stick nests, like you have that bald eagle nest on the left, huge nest in comparison to the surrounding area. Search for cavity nests as well, like those woodpecker holes, and then look for white droppings. So, like I said just a second ago, we have the bald eagle nest on the left. These are huge platform nests that they continue to build on year after year after year as long as it's a successful nest. And they like to have this area where they aren't in the canopy of the tree, they're just below it in a pretty well structured notch. So that way the canopy acts a little bit as an umbrella for any kind of sun or rain. It keeps the nest a little drier than it would be if it was completely on the top. The center there we have a blue-gray gnatcatcher nest. So they cover their nests in lichen and moss to try and camouflage it, make it a little harder for predators to see them. And on the right there we have a barn owl, which was our mystery bird for today. It's kind of fun. You can see its head just poking up through the hole here, but you can also see those white droppings on the exit of the nest. So when you're looking, sometimes it's not as easy as just scanning with your binoculars and you see, oh, there's the bird. So here we have a great horned owl, and it's got two nestlings, and it actually got pushed off of its nest. And we zoomed in a little bit. You can see the one of the nestlings here, still in his fluffy down. The other one is here, and then the parent, most likely the mother, is right here in the center. So, depending on the bird, you can have very high levels of camouflage, make it a lot more difficult for you to
Hmm.
see them, but it also makes it very cool when you do actually get the visual. So, looking for pairs, this works primarily for less social species. So, like the raptors, we have two red-tailed hawks in the center. They're somewhat social, but for the most part, they tend to stay to themselves. Dimorphic species are a good sign. So dimorphism means there's a difference between the male and the female. So if you think like a peacock, you have the male Indian peafowl has that beautiful tail, bright blue plumage. All of that. Female is a little bit more drab, doesn't have that huge train. That's dimorphism. Uh, all of these birds in the slide, I just realized, don't have any dimorphism, so that doesn't help. But the gray kingbirds, the red-tailed hawks, and the bald eagles are all non-dimorphic birds. And it's also not necessarily a dead giveaway. So just keep it in mind. It's good practice to see a pair in an area and have a good idea that they are going to be a nesting pair, but it's not foolproof. So this was kind of cool. These are Mississippi kites. This was from my backyard in 2012, and I had come home from school and I saw these guys circling around in the yard. Grabbed my camera, ran outside. One of them, the female on the left, perched, and the male was flying around her, kind of showing off. Flew up, landed, copulated, and then both of them took off. So this is a case where you definitely had two birds that were a nesting pair, most likely, and just happy to be in the right place for the right time for this photo. So courtship displays and copulation. So watch for that courtship display. This could be dancing, duets, gift giving, a ton of different things that they can do. And then copulation often occurs at or near the nest site. So they the female will usually base whether or not if they're going to mate with the male if they have a good either territory or setup nest already. So we've got the sandhill cranes doing their dance in Nebraska, and then we have barn swallows, not barn owls, barn swallows copulating. So duets are a way that birds will maintain and build their pair bonds throughout the year. So they'll do this during and outside of the nesting season. And so this allows them to stay together even when they don't have to raise young. So highly social, highly intelligent birds are like this. So very cool to see this. This is at the Orlando wetlands. Their nesting pair of sandhill cranes, super famous for all their colts, but cool to see them, and the sound is super loud. We have gift giving. We have the red-shouldered hawk on the right ended up giving that lizard to the hawk that's now
With
leaving the nest.
more.
So they're doing a trade-off. So don't know which is which as far as male and female, but one hawk gave the other hawk a little bit of lunch and then is going to take over on the nest for incubation. So really cool. And then we have copulation. These are a pair of great horned owls just after. And so we've got the male is taking off. The females or the birds in general typically won't mate unless they have a nest site ready. Either it's already built or they have one picked out and they're currently building it. It's one of those cases where you don't put the cart in front of the horse. They know that they need to have all of their ducks in a row before they actually start making eggs. So what do you do when you find the nest? Don't pin it. If you find a nest site, don't pin it directly in eBird. You don't want to be leading people into this area. It's very stressful, and they could abandon the site. So it's not good practice for ethics. Give it some space. Have a good pair of binoculars. Have a nice telephoto lens. Just give them some breathing room. Just treat it as if you are having someone look in your bedroom window. You wouldn't like that, so let's not do that to the birds. So the red masked parakeets again on the left, there was a family that wasn't paying attention, walked directly underneath their tree, freaked them out. Cool for a photo, not great for them, but still. Uh, the red-cockaded woodpeckers, this is at Clearwater Lake. Great site for these birds, local endangered species, which is awesome to see them having successful nests, especially with these hole limiters, so they don't get bigger and larger birds can get in there. And then an eastern screech owl nest as well. So as far as eBird goes, if you're uploading images into eBird, I always try to add as much data as I can for this. So anyone that's doing research, anyone that's trying to learn more about the birds through eBird and Cornell and all of that, adding these different tags. So like we have the age and sex. So there's no dimorphism with great blue herons. So I can't know if it's a male or female right now. So it's a adult. And then the sex unknown for the juveniles. So there's one here and one there. And this was just after feeding, so marked it for feeding young. That one's still begging, hoping that there's some more in there. And we also have the tag for nest. So if someone's looking for photos of nesting great blue herons, here you go. It's very easy for them to quickly find that. And then in eBird, this is the website portion of the managed species on the left and the gray blue or the app on the right. So with this, you can also add breeding codes. And what that does, and the one on the right, you can do this as you're filling out your eBird list in the field, which is great. But if you forget to do that and you want to do it on the computer after you've uploaded your photos and stuff, you can hit the breeding code and then you select which is the most applicable for your situation. So same thing with here, you would go into the species after you input the total number that you saw, go to the breeding code, and then you would select which one is the most accurate. So just a good way, good practice to increase the way that you're being effective in eBird and helping other people out too. So speaking of, you can help by volunteering with your local Audubon. So going on those walks in the morning, doing the counts and seeing what's in the area at Lake Apopka is huge. Helping out with that is big, and the more eyes that are out there, the more chances you are of seeing something odd. So it's always good to go out with your Audubon societies. Find and ethically monitor nests. We'll talk about how to do that here in a second. But again, have those good practices of giving it distance, using a lens, using stuff that closes the distance without actually physically closing the distance. And then you can also set up nest boxes. You can actively participate by providing areas for these birds to nest. So, and then for the photos, we have a swallowtail kite. Over here on the left, you have the adult there, and then the little fledgling right here. A double-crested cormorant, little hatchlings, probably only a couple of days old, and then a great crested flycatcher going into a nest hole, and they are secondary cavity nesters, so those woodpecker holes are vital for them. So with Marion Audubon, we do kestrel nesting monitors. So they are secondary cavity nesters. Their holes typically face northwest, and they prefer a height around 10 to 30 feet. Their nesting period is in late March to early July. The cool thing about the American kestrels is the ones that nest here in Florida, those are a southeastern subspecies. So it's another one of those regionally threatened. I don't know if they're endangered or not, but it's a threatened species that's unique to our area in Florida. They have up to 5 eggs per clutch, and they'll usually have 1 to 2 broods per year. A brood is the total number of series of offspring that they have. So they could have up to 10 offspring in a year. Most likely they won't all survive, but that's the reason why you have large number of eggs and multiple broods. Incubation is around that 26 to 32 days. They will have the nestlings in the nest for another 30 days or so, and then they'll take off, they'll be fledged, and then we have biparental care for them, and they have a relatively loose site fidelity. What that means is they don't necessarily always return to the same spot, like those bald eagles have very high site fidelity, where they'll return to the same site. Sometimes kestrels will come into the same nest hole that they had the year before. Sometimes they'll go to a completely different area. It's not super easy to know how they're going to go. So this is with our monitoring. So this is one of the kestrel boxes over at the Ocala Wetlands Recharge Park. And this is a picture of a clutch of kestrel eggs. So we work with FWC to do this. Our observations begin in March 26th. We have these are locations that these nest boxes are. The Regional Sportsplex, Big Sun Soccer, the Wetlands, Tuscarora Park, and Legacy Parks. So we have several that we do, and we've had a lot of fun doing them. Last year, we only had one egg or one nest active, so that's this one here. But if you're interested in learning more about this, you can reach out to myself. There's my email, or you can email our Audubon, Marion Audubon Society, and we're going to be gearing up for this in the next month. So if you're interested in seeing some kestrel nesting, then this is a great opportunity to do that. And then here's a little blueprint for the Kestrel Nest box. I'll have links to all of the stuff here at the very end, and I'll put it in the chat. But just an idea for how this is all set up. It's fairly specific on how they like to have it, and birds are very picky, especially the diameter of the entry hole. That's very dependent on what birds can and can't get through, and we'll talk about that in a second with bluebirds. So bald eagle nesting, they have these large nests in trees and tall structures like this one has on a radio tower. Their nesting period really depends on the range. In the north, it's March to July, but in the south, it's October to May. We have winter nesting for them in Florida. They usually have 1 to 3 eggs per clutch and only one brood per year. So unlike those kestrels, they really have to make sure that those offspring survive. Incubation is significantly more than the kestrel at around 35 days, and the nesting period for the young birds to be on there can be over 3 months. So at most 98 days. That's a long time for these birds to be taking care of the offspring. And then you do have biparental care, and like I said earlier, very high site fidelity as long as they are successful. If they're not successful in that area, they could potentially abandon it because they could associate that nest or that site with the unsuccessful nesting. So our Eagle Watch, we do, here's a link to it. And again, links will be at the very end. Uh, there are over 700 volunteers monitoring nearly 1,700 nests across Florida, which is huge. If you have an eagle nest, definitely report it. If you've got one that you see every morning when you're walking your dog or on your way to work and you see an eagle pop in and out of it, you should definitely consider checking out this link and starting to put some information in there. Blue dots are monitored, the red dots are unmonitored. So there's all of these locations where they've been reported, but they just aren't being continuously having information brought to Audubon. So our Florida bald eagles nest in October. Egg laying is usually December to January, and then the hatchlings are February to March. So right now we're seeing some of those hatchlings in the nests, and then they fledge in April all the way up into May. So in early summer, we start seeing some of those nice chocolate brown bald eagles flying around. And if you have questions about this, feel free to shoot an email out to eaglewatch@audubon.org. So here's where you can do your data input if you don't have a kestrel nest, or actually you can do kestrels through this, or an eagle. The eagles aren't specifically for this. So this is nestwatch.org. This is also run by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and it's the eBird equivalent of nesting, which is great. So you select your species location and you put in the description of the nest, and then you can just continuously enter information into that. So if you go and see the nest one day and you see a lot of activity, you can enter that in. If you see that the nest was abandoned, unfortunately, you can also enter that information. Uh, this site also gives you a lot of info on how to set up the nest box. It keeps your records of all of your sightings, and it provides a lot of really good data if you're interested in learning more about nests. So before you can do anything, you do have to take a little online quiz going through the ethics of nest watching. So there's a link to that. Again, everything's going to be at the very end. But this is it. It's a free app, just like eBird, just like Merlin. I mean, they're both right here because it's the same organization. But very cool. It's really useful. So if you're interested, definitely check it out. Purple Martin Conservation Project. This is research done through citizen science to monitor purple martin populations. They are on the decline as far as numbers, so it's important for us to understand why and where they're going to. So, Scout Arrival Study provides information on changing migration. There's actually one of it was the first day of the year, there was a purple martin reported in Florida, which was a big deal. So they're coming in sooner. We have to kind of figure out why. So Martin Watch performs banding and puts geolocators and GPS on purple martin so we can see where they're going when they head south into South America and when they're coming back in from there. You can also purchase all of your colony stuff from these guys too. So if you're interested in that, definitely give them a look. There's a link. Again, everything at the end. And these are the purple martin nests. If you've never seen one, especially during the peak of nesting season, they're super cool. It's very loud with the begging from the chicks, plus all of the vocalizations from the adults. It's very interesting. We've got a decoy here, so it's not a dead bird, it's just a plastic one. It's used to help draw them in. And then do have a live male here, and then a couple of females. And they're going in and out of these nest boxes, feeding dragonflies to all of these little birds. So bluebirds, they are also secondary cavity nesters. They prefer to have the hole facing east, and they can be anywhere between 4 to 50 feet from the ground. They're not too picky like the kestrels are. Nesting period is from March to July, so if you haven't put a nest up yet and you want to, you're still in that window where you could get it set up. They have 4 to 7 eggs per clutch and 1 to 3 broods per year, so potential of 21 birds at most. So that's great. Increase their numbers. Incubation is only 11 to 19 days, so significantly faster. It's a smaller bird. And their nesting period for the young ones is 17 to 18 days, so only a couple weeks, and they're ready to go. They do have biparental care, and they have got relatively moderate site fidelity. But if they're successful in one brood, they are very likely to stay in the same nest site if they're going to have their second and third. But if they fail at their first, then they're most likely going to leave it. So, should you make or buy a Bluebird box? Bluebird box are available pretty much everywhere. This is a mountain bluebird, not an Easter bluebird, by the way. So if you go to Walmart, you could find one. If you go to Wild Birds, you could definitely find one there. Amazon, all of that stuff, you can totally get it. You do also have guides that are completely free online, give you all of the instructions and dimensions for the holes you got to drill and the length of the wood that you're going to cut it. So that's a great resource too. You definitely want to use untreated wood. Treated wood can release a lot of different chemicals into the nest box, and then you've essentially got an oven that these birds are developing in that's being radiated with all of this junk. So definitely try and use untreated wood if you're making your own box. The entrance hole is 1.5 inches in diameter, and then the general dimensions are 5.5 wide by 5.5 long and 9 inches tall. So somewhat boxy, but rectangular. And the nest should be attached to a pole with a predator guard. What that is essentially like the cone of shame for a dog, but you put it at the base of the pole, and that prevents anything from coming up. So you can have different designs of them that are specific to stop snakes, to stop raccoons and squirrels, but anything to make it more difficult for something to get up into that nest and then steal all the eggs. So this is a Bluebird box on Amazon. 23 bucks, not that expensive, and then you can do your own monitoring at home. So where should you set it up? It's like real estate, it's all about location. So surrounding area should be very open, grassland or pasture with scattered trees. So they like to have some shade and some areas where they can fly out from, but they want to have that open area to hunt for insects. Put it somewhere between 4 to 10 feet off the ground. Higher is definitely better for preventing predators, but you don't want to go so high that you're not able to monitor the nest. The entrance hole should face in east towards the open space. So if you do have that kind of grassland or you got a nice yard that's got some open area, make sure that you're facing into that open area so they have space to fly in and out from. Additional boxes should be spaced 20 feet apart. Don't want to have them too close, creates stress between the different birds. Make sure that they're clean or make sure there is food and water accessible from where they are, but don't put it too near a bird feeder because you're going to have, again, that high volume of movement is going to be a stressor for those nesting birds. Uh, Check the nest weekly, clean out old nests after the fledglings have gone. So if you see that the nest has been abandoned after you've had fledglings, you can clean it out after that. That's totally fine. But as the season's going on, just leave it alone. They'll take care of it themselves. Should put them up by February in the southeast. So now's your chance if you want to have some bluebirds. So who else uses bluebird houses? Essentially any secondary cavity nester. So we've got the tree swallow up here and then a house sparrow, unfortunately, down here. Bluebirds prefer nesting with smaller neighbors. Titmice, wrens, nuthatches, swallows, and flycatchers are all totally fine with bluebirds. Uh, if you change the size of the hole, or a woodpecker could change the size of the hole, it's going to change what bird can go into it. So if it's a larger hole, bigger bird can go inside. Potentially, you could have a um, eastern screech owl in your bluebird box instead of a bluebird. But do be careful about house sparrows and European starlings. They are very aggressive. They'll take over a bluebird house very easily, and they're not a native species, so they're not protected. So if you do have them go into your nest box, you can remove the nest and not face consequences that you would if you were to remove like a titmouse nest. So why is nest monitoring important? It gives us data on the success rates of these birds, and we've got declining populations of birds everywhere, and so seeing how they're staying successful is extremely important. It gives us a better understanding of what species nest in certain areas, and it also gives us a way to see the patterns and changes of nesting in time. Like that purple martin coming in so early, we might start seeing that they're coming back into Florida much earlier than they were years before. That could be due to a number of different things, and by monitoring these nesting behaviors, we can really help out the scientists with that. So with that, I want to thank you all for your attention. I hope this was very enjoyable for you. If you've got any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them now. Here are all those links if you want to take a screenshot real quick. Again, I'll post this in the comments after I get the screen share off. And then if any of you would like to check out my website, QR code and the link is on the left. Our Audubon Society for Marion, they're in the center. And if you don't have an eBird account, I would strongly recommend that you get it. It's completely free. It's a great way to get into birding more, get a lot of good information.
Great. Yeah, great. With the bluebirds, is there a minimum number that you want to have?
No, well, if like for the number of nest boxes,
Mhm.
minimum one, obviously, because you want to have bluebirds, but um, as long as you're keeping them spaced apart enough, you can have as many as you can fit within that kind of 20 foot radius of the different houses. Let's see.
Very good. Cindy was saying awesome, and she wanted your thoughts on the eaglets that died in Fort Myers of avian flu.
Oh, that's too bad. Yeah, I've seen more signs. Let me copy those links before I forget. I've seen more signs of the avian flu going around. We had a case with our Tuscaloosa Park where we had three cormorants that had all died from avian flu. So FWC came and picked up those carcasses to get tested. But yeah, there's definitely something going on with the increase in the flu. So hopefully they can figure out what the cause is and how we can kind of stem it off. But yeah, that's unfortunate that some eaglets passed away from it.
Okay, and then I think V Centello said, can you go back to the links? And he did post that in the chat. So if you want to go back down in the chat, you can make a copy of it there.
Yes, yeah, all the links are down in the chat. So if you want to copy those into your, okay, you got it, perfect. If you want to copy those into your little notes, that by all means, great resources. Pretty much everything on here is free to do, other than like buying the Bluebird box. But all of the other stuff is completely free, which is great. Let's see, do American kestrels all? West facing any state.
We have some people from out of Florida. Just
Gotcha. I think I would imagine that they're going to be pretty consistent with wanting to have the same direction of their nest hole. So I would say kind of that northwest zone. You could get in touch with your local Audubon. They might know a little bit more, but specifically, at least for our southeastern kestrels, they prefer that northwest facing hole.
yeah, and Cindy wanted to know if she could put a
Mhm.
bluebird box in her yard for the Carolina wrens.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You could totally do that. Carolina wrens, house wrens, they'll nest in that perfectly fine. A couple years ago, I was living with a friend, and it was in a townhouse, and we had a little plant potter on the uh, windowsill of my room, and Carolina wren decided to turn that into its nesting area. So that was super cool. Waking up, hearing it kind of chatter and stuff in the morning, and then seeing the little hatchlings come out. So that was a lot of fun. But they're not too picky. So if you put one out, I'd be surprised if they don't take it.
Yeah, and I think they have plans for them. If you go
Mhm.
to Audubon, the Nest Watch, I think they have plans for all the different birds.
Yeah, yeah, they
Box
give you all
plans.
that. A lot of the data that I have from this presentation comes from NestWatch. So if you want to get any more of that stuff, especially like where you should be placing the nest box, the height, the hole of the entry hole, or the diameter of the entry hole, all that kind of stuff, pretty much all of that is on NestWatch. So you can do that on the website for a lot of that data, and then just like eBird, your data entry is going to be through your phone.
And Delcy puts that the two eaglets at Joe
Oh.
Overstreet also died. Do you know if they died of flu, Delcy, or just there's so many things that can
Yeah, that's too
happen?
bad. I don't know.
She
Okay.
doesn't
Well,
know. Mm,
no, that's awful. That's hopefully it's not connected, but if it is, that's not good.
yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, the birds in general have a hard time when they're young. The success rate of nesting birds is relatively low, which is why you see those large clutches and large broods. But with eagles specifically, you only typically have that one brood per year, so it can be devastating to a population if they keep having failures in nesting. So hopefully it's nothing too severe. Hopefully it's just a seasonal thing. We had a bad year this year with a couple of them, but well, we'll see. Let's see.
Oh, great information. I think
Uh,
my
Thank you,
favorite
Karen.
tree swallow nesting pair was in a doggy bag dispenser box up in Howard Marsh, Ohio, and they just were like took it over.
That's awesome.
So it was very cute.
That's super cool.
Yeah. So any kind of box, I guess, for them.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of them. Oh, you're welcome, Cindy. Thank you. A lot of them, or I wouldn't say a lot of them, but different birds can be more or less picky than other ones. So some of them are very particular on where they like the kestrels. For whatever reason, we've got nest boxes up at the Ocala wetlands from the picture. I think they've only used that nest box once, and they like to use the trees in the surrounding area instead. So sometimes when you put a box up, they'll take them pretty quick. Bluebirds are pretty good about that, and different wrens are also pretty good about it too. But some just don't want to take it. So it just is all kind of down to the individual, I guess.
And
Max,
availability. Yeah.
Max, I have a question.
Yeah.
We had a Carolina wren that was built a nest in our garage, and we
Oh,
knew
yep.
that, so we left a little gap so that she could fly in and out.
Mhm.
But about 3 to 4 days after she laid her eggs, they disappeared.
Yeah, it's site abandonment. So it was either she wasn't
The
getting enough
eggs were gone
food.
too.
Oh, well, that's a predator then.
Oh, really?
Yeah, most likely a snake. So if the eggs are gone, the bird can't carry those eggs away. So it's definitely was taken. So it's either a cat or a snake are your two most likely culprits for that. hopefully the bird didn't get taken too, but if it did lose the eggs, like if it left, went out, went to go forage a little bit, come back, and the eggs
Yeah.
are gone, it's just going to abandon the site. It's not going to
Oh,
waste time there anymore, unfortunately.
oh, thank you.
Oh, you're
Thanks
welcome.
for the
Absolutely.
And I think Cindy also said that her eggs
Yep.
disappeared on her
Yeah,
nest.
yeah, be careful with snakes. You've got there's a lot of different animals that'll nest rob. And bird eggs are a superfood in nature. It's just packed with protein and fat. So it's like candy for a lot of these different birds. Or different, well, birds too, I guess. Crows and jays will go after bird eggs, but you have raccoons. House cats are one of the biggest negative proponents on bird populations in the world, and that's a direct fault of us as humans having them go feral. But they'll go after nestlings like crazy, and eggs too. Oh, perfect. Thank you, Vicentello. I'm sorry if I butchered your name. Horrible, and this was in my bike basket. Yeah, that's unfortunate. It could have, if it was there, it could have been any number of different potential predators. But that's it's one of the kind of positives and negatives with birds like the wrens, where since they'll nest just about anywhere, you have a potential for them to nest in the wrong spot, and then they can have a failure. Oh, you're welcome, Penny. Thank you. Vicky, sorry.
Very interesting.
Thank you, Dulcie. Yeah, it's I've got some neighbors that like to have their cats walk around in our yard, so it's not a big fan of that.
Me too.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm thinking of trying, Kathy, what's that thing you train your dog with? Will that work for cats?
Was
Spray
that?
air or something?
Oh, compressed air? Well, to be fair,
Compressed
when the
air?
cat comes around, it probably wouldn't like it much. Yeah, you
Uh,
can get it off Amazon for like $10 a little can, but you got to be fairly close.
mhm.
But wasn't our friend Larry told us he uses cayenne pepper,
Yeah.
sprinkles it on the ground?
Yep. Citrus smell as well. Apparently they don't like. I used to use like uh orange was it orange extract. Just mix it with some water and then spray it around, and that
Oh,
kept them out of my garden for a little while. Cindy, I do have a website. It's maxbirdfacts.com. I just put it in the chat. But yeah, there's a lot of ways that you can get around the cats, but ultimately it should just be animal control trapping them and putting them in the kennels. But it's
yeah,
unfortunate.
yeah,
It is.
yeah. Now, isn't it true, you touched on this a little bit, but
Mhm.
if people have a nest near their house, they shouldn't, well, obviously shouldn't get too close, and they shouldn't even travel the same path to look at it because it's going to create a
Yes.
pathway for predators,
Yep.
correct?
Yep, absolutely. And you're welcome, Cindy. So one of the things that's in the that little quiz that you'll do if you do sign up for Nest Watch is they'll tell you specifically do not have a set path that you continuously do because predators will pick up on that and they'll know that there's something going on with that area, get curious, and then check it out. So if you approach it one day from the front, the next day you should come in from around the back. Another day you should be doing this. You should also be spacing out your time when you're doing, not at the same time as well. Kind of watching it from a distance when the adult leaves, so that way they don't you scare them as they're sitting on the eggs. So that's all covered in the Nest Watch little quiz that you'll do when you sign up to be a Nest Watcher. But yeah, definitely don't have like a set routine that you do because specifically crows are smart enough that they'll pick up on that like nothing and they'll know when you're going to be going there and they'll watch you. And if you're giving it more attention than they think, then they're probably going to go and try and get inside of that nest.
Right.
All right, any more questions?
Yep, crows are super smart.
That was a great presentation.
Thank
That
you.
was.
Thank you.
Very appropriate for right now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Perfect timing.
Yeah, so make sure you get those nest boxes up. We can have, if you want bluebirds, you could hopefully get some bluebirds. If you're going for those wrens, then good luck. Hopefully you'll get some coming in. But check out the Nest Watch. They'll give you all the information that you'll need.
Thank you so
Right.
much.
Perfect. You're welcome. Absolutely. It's my pleasure.
Yes.
All right.
Appreciate it. And sign up for Max's field trip. It's on our website. It's going to be a lot of
Yep.
fun.
Yep, and I'll be at the Orlando Wetlands Festival as well. I'm leading the trip. Let me double check my email. I think it was at 10:30, but let me double check it before I say anything. 10:45 to noon. I'm going to be doing the walk with Jennifer Ruby.
She's
So if
amazing.
anyone wants to come out, by all means, come to the Orlando Wetlands. Great time. We'll see some nesting birds.
Definitely will see nesting
Sounds
birds.
Yes.
good.
Yes.
Okay, thanks, everybody. We'll say goodnight. Thanks again, Max.
Perfect.
Bye,
Yep.
everybody.
You're welcome. Good night.
Bye. Thank you, Max.
Night.